Welcome to Sierra Capital's Family Office Fundamentals, a podcast dedicated to helping families preserve their legacies and wealth for future generations. I'm your host, Zev Zaretsky, Investment Director at Sierra Capital, a 25-year-old multifamily office focused on guiding ultra-high net worth families globally. In each episode, we'll explore a wide range of topics, including investments, trust and estates, family governance, philanthropy, and much more. Our goal is to provide you with a solid foundation to safeguard your family's financial, intellectual, and human capital for generations to come. Join us on this journey and stay tuned as we hear insightful conversations with industry experts and thought leaders right here on Family Office Fundamentals. Let's embark on this journey together. Please find important disclosures at the end of this podcast. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Brian Schettler, partner at AE Industrial and head of AE Ventures, the firm's venture capital arm. Before AE, Brian founded and led Boeing HorizonX Ventures, building it into one of the world's top corporate VC units. With over 20 years in aerospace, defense, and tech, spanning strategy, M&A, and investing, he brings a unique perspective on innovation in complex industries. Let's dive in. All right, cool. Well, Brian, hey, thanks for coming on to the podcast, Family Office Fundamentals. It's great to have you on. And then we also have Carlos Pedroso, partner at Sierra Capital. Well, actually, Carlos, how about if you kind of jump in and give us a little bit of your background, when you joined the firm, and how you've been part of its evolution.
Perfect. I'm excited to be here, Zev. Thanks for including me. And Brian, we're looking forward to this conversation. I started at Sierra Capital about 18 years ago, and Sierra's been in business since 1998. It's about 27 years in business. I'm a partner at the firm, and I started my career at JP Morgan in 2004, covering ultra high net worth clients, foundations, and institutions. And I came to the realization that I couldn't be fully aligned with clients working at a big bank. So I felt that in order to get more aligned with a client, I need to go independent. And that's where I found Sierra Capital. And being at Sierra Capital resulted in having an open architecture platform where if it wasn't for that open architecture, we wouldn't be able to find firms like AE Industrial Partners.
Well, so Brian, I guess to kick it off with you, if you could share a little bit about your background, previous work experience, and kind of what brought you to the world of growth equity, venture, and particularly in the defense space.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's great to connect with you guys and share a little bit more about what we're up to. My background certainly doesn't follow a traditional venture path, although I don't know that there's a well-defined definition of traditional anymore when it comes to venture. But for me personally and how I got to where I am today, it really all started as an electrical engineer out of undergrad that just jumped into a defense company as sort of my first real job. I was working for Northrop Grumman, designing fire control radars and working a lot of interesting space-based programs and high-tech sort of capabilities and products. Got me fascinated with innovation, got me fascinated with the sort of national security space, how big companies sort of fit into the ecosystem. So got to working for a variety of companies in the space. Started with Northrop, worked for Boeing Phantom Works for a while, worked for a British company called Cobham, and just got exposed to sort of the entire supply chain that makes up that world. And I saw a lot of what companies could do on their own, but also, the pitfalls and constrained budgets and other sort of, just elements that, can put a cap on how innovative companies can be. So I moved into kind of corporate strategy, M&A roles. We were trying to solve innovation challenges by just doing kind of bolt-on acquisitions at these companies or portfolio shaping. And it really wasn't until 2017 that I rejoined Boeing, with a dedicated sort of mandate from the CEO to tap into the venture ecosystem, more. It was really for Boeing, the time that they saw disruption building on the outside, that they finally saw kind of a level of startup engagement focused on innovation that was relevant to kind of these markets and the needs there, and wanted to start building some bridges to connect into that and get access and direct exposure to it with investment. And so I joined Boeing in 2017. got to design a venture capital fund from scratch and really, focused primarily on, of course, kind of the sourcing, scouting, and exposure to what was going on, but at the same time, really thinking about what a strategic edge, like, the resources of a company like Boeing could bring to the startups in a way that essentially has a value added sort of mindset. In 2021, I sort of kept seeing, as we were deploying capital and working with startups, that there was a natural evolution or hybrid model that I thought could work a little bit better rather than focusing on startup activity that uniquely benefited one particular company in the ecosystem, like a Boeing. Could we do something that really served the holistic sort of industry, including the lower level supply chain, and really drive almost like 100% market focus instead of partial? That's when I identified AE Industrial as a great experience manager in aerospace and defense that could join, and was able to work with Boeing on a strategy to spin out the fund and really bring kind of a venture capability all under one roof with AE. And so that was in 2021, and been at AE sort of ever since. Currently, running the VC strategy for them, have three funds that were kind of simultaneously managing a portfolio, raising capital, deploying capital, all with a great focus kind of on the early stage innovation and, really kind of a specialist sort of mindset to aerospace and defense.
Well, Brian, it seems like you definitely have the experience behind you, and that bridge exposure that you had with Boeing and bridging it to AE Industrial was definitely the right fit. So AE is about a $6.5 billion firm as per your last ADV, and you have about 95 employees. Can you give us an overview of the firm's primary focus and where do you and your team fit within the broader organization?
Yeah, so as I sort of mentioned that, when we were spinning out, like, it was identifying potential partners to join as part of the spin, and AE stood above the pack because they had a lot of deep specialization in A&D. Like that's what I thought was really relevant, in terms of being a value-added partner here, was just bringing as much experience and capability as possible to portfolio companies to impact outcomes for the better, to essentially improve alpha, because there's more that you can contribute as a board member, as an advisor, as an value-added partner, as a source of revenue. And so AE sort of had all of that infrastructure and mechanism in place. I mean, they're a legacy buyout, traditional private equity firm, a lot of A&D sort of specialization, but where we could add some sort of unique value was bringing, an early stage look, sort of an eyes and ears to the innovation, a sort of capability development going on in A&D that would be really relevant if you thought about sort of an integrated investment sort of mandate. And that's how we sort of approach it at AE. So the firm got started in the 90s. There was founded by Brian and David Rowe. Brian was essentially sort of a pioneer of the gas turbine engine as an engineer, and then ultimately, sort of led all of GE Aviation for a variety of years. His son David had a really successful career at GE Capital, Gulfstream, and others. And so bringing that together with sort of that specialist mindset from the beginning was really where they began, and they started investing alongside the Carlyle Group, brought sort of their industry expertise to a long list of successful investments, so, along with Carlyle. Brian passed away. David brought on Mike Green as sort of a co-lead of the firm now, sort of further expanded the breadth of the firm. Mike came from UBS Capital. But with that mindset of platform building for PE as sort of the primary focus, they would tap into a lot of critical supply chain companies for aerospace and defense, and then do a buy and build strategy of bolting on extra capability to create size and scale in the industry. And like I said, getting to sort of that AUM for the firm at the current level.
Are there any like notable companies that are with like still sitting in the portfolio or have, exited the portfolio that maybe like the broader audience would know?
I think some that are currently in the portfolio today that many would know is Firefly Aerospace on the buyout side. That's sort of a leading space launch capability. They also had a tremendous accomplishment around a month ago where they were the first sort of private company to land a lunar lander on the moon.
Mm.
So a tremendous achievement there, but they're bringing, a lot of new capability to the launch space. You it's easy to think it's sort of flooded with just sort of SpaceX, but there's a lot of middle ground and new capability that can go there to tap into all the demand. So that's one of the big ones.
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, so then I guess to focus more on your fund. So I know that your fund is SBIC, accrual debenture fund, right?
Yes.
And from listening to the podcast, we've done a couple different SBICs. So the accrual is a little bit different. It's accruing interest rather than, having to be paid. But then in addition, you also have that special partnership with the Department of Defense. So maybe briefly, if you could just explain kind of what the SBIC license does for the fund, but then also the Department of Defense partnership and kind of why it gives you guys a competitive advantage to, another firm that might be doing the same thing.
Yeah. Uh, so as you mentioned, it was about a year and a half ago that the Office of Strategic Capital inside the Department of Defense started working on this new initiative to really create this unique product, an SBIC, but with an attractive sort of debenture program that was more attuned to venture. That was so this accrual sort of process that as a manager allows you to be much more efficient with how you deploy capital, how you pay back interest, and it all accrues as part of a natural element of the waterfall instead of having to generate artificial sort of cash early in the fund just to pay your interest. So that was a real sort of attractive sort of setup. But as you alluded to, it's a partnership with the Department of Defense that really makes things unique and attractive. So in our case, we went through a pretty robust underwriting process to get accepted into the program. We were one of 17 funds kind of greenlit late last year that went through licensing, got the sign off, and then were authorized to proceed with our first close. But now that we're sort of up and running and licensed, we get two primary benefits. One is the capital match that comes out of the SBA. So the Small Business Administration, in our case, approved 125% match of capital raised via our LP base. So in our case, we targeted 125 million. The SBA will add about 150 million on top of that as leverage. Two great things come from that. One is the flexibility on the interest payments, so we don't have to manage it aggressively like you would if it was just sort of a traditional interest schedule. But the second is, I think this is obvious, but we get to benefit from the returns generated by that leverage and share it with our LP base. So the SBA just takes back their principal and interest, and all of the returns from their capital get shared with the LPs in the fund. The OSC partnership, though, is what really matters in terms of how we execute and work with our portfolio companies. This partnership essentially acts as a inside the Pentagon sort of a toolkit to be able to understand what kind of trends and demands and capability needs are coming out of government and where there could be resources available to deploy to those. And so that helps us shape our formulation of where to go hunt, where prime opportunities are from a technology level to invest in startups and where solutions and new capabilities are actually needed. So on the front end, it's very effective on the funnel. But on the back end, this OSC team and their connections all through government, not just DoD, all through government, really can act as an extra function to help support the portfolio companies. What are the unique sort of inroads to various government agencies? What are inroads to potential contracts and future programs of record? And these are also just, things that are left less to chance as to whether a portfolio company is going to make great inroads, with that customer base or not.
Okay, so it's not just having some data points of what the Pentagon's doing, but there's actually people that are part of that group that you get to work with on a more consistent basis.
There is a whole team inside of OSC after your license that really get to be a team sort of function for us as the manager, but also with the individual portfolio companies and the direct relationships that get built there.
That's great. Well, Brian, let's go into structuring and how you structure most of these deals. Like we're seeing a shift in private equity and venture capital, and they're being a little bit more creative in their deal structuring in this interest rate environment. How does your team typically approach deal structuring, and has that strategy evolved in today's market?
Yeah, so I mean, even since our Boeing days, but certainly today, we are early stage focused. So for us, that means seed, Series A, Series B is sort of the sweet spot. So getting in early before there's a lot of investors on the cap table or a lot of things set in stone that may or may not be, you know, attractive or a hindrance to these companies in the future. So we like as the DNA of a private equity firm, a buyout firm, sort of immerses us at the venture level in a good way. It's all about activism and deep engagement. And so for us, that means leading or co-leading nearly every deal that we invest in and deploy capital out. And so we are, originating deals, starting to build co-investor bases, setting the terms, setting valuation, but most importantly, almost setting the basics for success post-investment. We are not the type that just wires a check and then wipes our hands and walks away. We want to set the conditions with effective governance, a board position or a board observer at a minimum that really motivates and incentivizes us to be sort of the closest and most engaged member on the cap table, certainly when it comes to our areas of expertise, technology, regulation, government acquisition process, just immersion into the entire sort of defense industrial base ecosystem and supply chain. And so that's where we spend a lot of time. We structure our fund to sort of allocate capital, basically 50% of the fund to be the first checks in businesses, but then also reserving about 50% for follow-on investments so we can double down and ensure, kind of long-term pro rata on the best companies in the portfolio. And we offer that to our co-investors and LPs in the fund too, where we'll create, since we're often leading, we architect the cap table to create allocations for our LPs when there's that co-invest interest for direct exposure.
Do you have any examples of some like recent deals? Maybe just one that's crosses your mind.
Yeah, there was one out of our Fund Two, a company called Zero Matter. Zero Matter is a really exciting business that it was essentially created by the team at Tesla that had done a lot of the self-driving autonomy and compute conditions really to make that capability successful. And what they saw was an opportunity to sort of apply that to a broader sort of set of simulation capabilities for autonomy, where you're really sort of connecting to sensor-based training. So anything that needs a sensor, that needs a physics-based sort of model and simulation to train itself is really where they accelerate. And they can do things at an amazing sort of scale and compute performance that others haven't been remotely able to touch. So we're seeing a lot of interest in automotive, in aerospace, and national security as AI is becoming more impactful. You have to train that AI, and you have to do a lot more with sort of the software layer and algorithms behind the scenes. And Zero Matter has been a great success story that is over 5x in value for us in the 9 months or so of ownership. And we just closed a follow-on round with them that's been a greatly successful and has brought a lot of follow-on capital to the business.
So, Brian, it sounds like you guys are definitely on the cutting edge of aerospace and defense. And given the current like geopolitical environment and the tensions in Ukraine, Israel, and China. You mentioned you're seeing a significant evolution in military strategy towards artificial intelligence. We're also hearing a lot about drone technology. What other trends are you seeing in this space? And who do you think are the biggest beneficiaries over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I think we're reminded nearly every single day that the world is an unstable place. Significant tension, not just in one, but sort of many regions of the world. And that, of course, translates to, higher defense budgets, not only in the US, but allied nations around the world. So from a macro trend, I'd say there's more sort of top line demand and spend going into these areas than ever before. I think the other major trend, though, that we see is what really got sort of kickstarted with it was almost SpaceX and Elon, 10 plus years ago, where evolving from a OEM mentality where there's just a few exquisite primes that drive the defense industrial base to now being a much more hybrid based solution where you have new capabilities coming online from everywhere. You can still have the exquisites that the primes are well suited for, but you have a lot of emergent, almost like commercially minded technologies coming online that do good enough, but they're better, or they're faster and cheaper, certainly than waiting for long-term exquisite solutions and costly solutions to come online. So with those sort of trends coming together of massive spend, along with the customer embracing sort of new ways to purchase and new capabilities they're willing to accept, that has stimulated a startup ecosystem that's stronger, has a stronger focus on these markets than ever before. So we're seeing founders create businesses with the sole purpose of addressing a key critical technology or national security challenge. Carlos, you mentioned the drone space. There's more unique sort of drone businesses out there, all tailored to certain use cases and applications, whether it's remote sensing or logistics and transportation, or defense, sort of protection and airspace defense and management. Like there's a lot of new solutions that just didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, unless they were coming out of a prime. So we love those conditions all coming together. It's right in our sweet spot of sort of being able to identify where the key needs are, understanding if there's actually government resources and contracts available. The last thing you want is a neat technology, but there's no business for it. And so we try to bring all that together as we evaluate. And then how do you actually navigate the landscape to ensure, you get a proof of concept type contract out of government, how that evolves and you actually get written into the budget so you have a program of record or a long-term sort of stable fixture for your business that ensures, kind of robust purchasing and demand. That's where we fit, and that's sort of what we're just seeing play out in real time now, where there's this just emerging support for the startup ecosystem, VC ecosystem, to address the needs for them.
Where do you where do you find most of these companies are located? Like, so for banks that are looking at investing, obviously, like community reinvestment act credit is somewhat important. But so like, are a lot of these companies going to be California based? Are they going to be Florida based around Cape Canaveral? Like, like where is it that, or is most of these companies based in Washington, D.C.? What is it that you've seen kind of in the portfolio construction so far?
So we're seeing it happen everywhere, to be honest with you. I think we've long moved away from the common sort of mindset of you have to be in Silicon Valley and close to Sand Hill Road or something to start your business, especially when you're talking about these end markets and who your key customers are. You have a lot more flexibility in terms of where the startups form and who they're engaging with. So yes, Washington, D.C. is certainly an interesting area. You might have a sales and regional sort of outpost there, and a few of our companies are based there. But actually, what you're thinking about more, since we invest in both software and hardware businesses, is where do you actually do the work? If it's, especially if it's hardware based, where might you have a factory? So what states offer some incentives that maybe draw companies to that area? Where is there a skilled enough and effective employee base that can, really be called upon when you need to ramp production and scale the company? So we see everything from companies in Florida to Alabama, Texas, um, California, but really it can be anywhere, Zev, to be honest with you. And there's so many Department of Defense bases and outposts, as well. Texas has Army Futures Command, and so you can be based there and still have a close Department of Defense ally. So it's really case by case, but we're seeing
Yeah.
them everywhere.
Well, so one thing that you kind of touched upon before is the strategic benefit of going with, A industrial partners. So maybe we could spend like just 2, 3 minutes on the platform as a whole. I know that you guys have a lot of people that sit on the board that help and just the partners of the firm and their connections. So when we think of your group, which is small relative to to the firm as a whole, um, what type of additional benefits are you getting?
Yeah, so if the venture capability didn't exist at AE, they would still have, roughly 85, employees with a big chunk of operating partners, which are brought on to, help bolster sort of the hands-on mentality that the buyout side takes. So with that kind of AUM that the buyout side has, they're bringing on a really strong sort of exclusive team of experienced individuals out of government. You have General Jim McConville, former four-star and chief of staff of the Army. You have Ryan McCarthy, who was the former Secretary of the Army. You have some former admirals and folks that came out of government and lobbying even. And so they've been able to build a really strong infrastructure of capable individuals that have real world experience that can be applied to these buyout companies and really help them from everything from an operational perspective, technology perspective, regulatory perspective. And so that's a really strong, stable base. For me on the venture side and being able to join AE and sort of tuck in a venture capability under the same manager, everything I just described of those benefits of those individuals to the buyout side, we're tapping into and pulling in earlier than ever to the venture ecosystem. And these are individuals, right, that a small, couple hundred million AUM venture strategy would never be able to afford or get exclusive access to on their own. And so being part of AE and being able to pull those individuals in is incredibly valuable and incredibly unique. And these aren't just sort of, consultants that I can tap into and pay an hourly rate. These are vested individuals that are exclusive to AE and have that deep experience, and they're highly motivated to jump in, roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and help the companies in any way, shape, or form. It is honestly blowing our portfolio companies on the venture side away. Who we're bringing to the table, who's coming to the management presentations and asking tough questions on the front end. But then when you're in the portfolio, who we're putting on the boards, who are acting as strategic advisors to help them secure their first government contract, you name it. And so that's something we are really proud of, and we just have a playbook with each new portfolio company that we add to the fund of just what resources we can assign and bring on day one, and set the conditions for success in terms of that company, but ultimately fund performance.
I guess one last question for you. When you talk about the DoD partnership and the Office of Strategic Capital at the Department of Defense, what what are their key focuses now from your conversations with them over the past 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So the critical technologies that really defined the stand up of this program in the first place are well documented. You can go on DoD's website, search for, DoD critical technologies, and you'll see the 14 that are published. And there's a broad mix there, and everything from like biotechnology to quantum, and things in between. As we look at the list, there are some technology areas that really excite us. There's sort of the trusted AI and autonomy. There's space technology. There's advanced computing and software, directed energy, sort of just to name a few. Like these are neat, like specific technologies that are of critical importance. When we go and sort of deploy capital and think about where to invest, we kind of then take these technology areas in mind, but we think much more about like capabilities and mission and kind of what a founding team is doing to sort of set up the conditions to be a really successful business, is different than just saying, I have the best scientists and I'm going to create the coolest technology. And so we try to blend that thinking together by really going on the hunt for companies that, yes, are addressing kind of the explicit intentions of these technologies from DoD, but are really sort of building a business that we think is scalable and fits well into sort of the proof of the future programs of record that the government is looking to spend. So I guess I said, for us, that means hardware and software, and that's encompassing on the list. But then we think of where it fits. So we'll do everything that goes into like a future platform and or key subsystem of a new national security product. We'll do enabling technology. So just how do engineers and individuals do their work more effectively? So that could be new software tools, it could be design tools, simulation tools, etc. How you actually manufacture is a key sticking point for a lot of these. Again, you could have the best sort of directed energy technology on paper, but if you don't have a manufacturing and production system, including a domestic supply chain that really can ensure you can produce these things at scale, then that also is some inherent weakness. So we think a lot about manufacturing and supply chain capabilities as part of our investment thesis.
Yeah, well, seems like that type of stuff fits, especially in the current political environment as well. So
yeah, exactly. There's great alignment, there of, wanting assured access, less reliance on China and other areas where you're seeing it now with rare earth minerals, where, China is holding back on delivery of critical rare earths that are needed for everything from, semiconductors in your automobile, but more importantly, semiconductors that go in, an F-22, aircraft.
yeah, no, makes sense. Well, your focus definitely, it's very different than the typical industrial focused SBIC or lower middle market, type of company that we talk to. So we appreciate you having on. Obviously, if anyone wanted to contact you, check out the website. Anyone could reach out to me. But yeah, Carlos, I don't know if you had anything you want to add.
No, it just sounds like you're on the forefront of the future of military technology, and we're excited to continue to learn more about you, and we're excited that you finally got your license with the SBIC.
Well, yeah, thank you both. I mean, it's a big moment for us. We're really excited about the next chapter. We also realize we can't, do it alone. We work, closely, not only with our LPs that support us, but, a co-investor network and partners that really, focus every day on trying to make this strategy successful, make these companies successful. So yeah, if anybody ever wants to reach out, please do so. And, hopefully we'll be back on with even more success stories in the future. So thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. The information presented in this podcast is the opinion of Sierra Capital and does not reflect the view of any other person or entity. The information provided is believed to be from reliable sources, but no liability is accepted for any inaccuracies. This is for information purposes only and should not be construed as an investment recommendation.